Hello, welcome viewers. Tonight we'll be discussing Star Wars, the new movie that just came out. Yes. So, here we have two people who have history of Star Wars, like I'm sure like 99% of the planet. Here's Kelly and Victor. You guys say
Hello.
Hello.
and I've also seen Star Wars many times, and I'm also here to discuss that as well. So, first off, we're going to be talking about this movie freely, mentioning probably plot points, so it's going to be probably full of spoilers. So, if you're afraid of that, then you could watch the movie first, then come see us afterwards. Also, a reminder, we have a Q&A app, which allows you to talk, send questions to us live, and we can read your question and answer it. Or if you just have comments, you can write that as well. To do that, you have to go to the Google Plus page, and you should see there the option to do that. Okay then, so how do you guys want to start? You want to talk about the plots? You want to just talk about what our reactions are to that?
I don't know. We can start. I'd like to start talking about, for example, the plot. Yes, like how
Okay.
we discussed that it was very much like a copy of, well, the other Star Wars movies, like very similar points. For example, they blew up something that looked like a Death Star, and they had like a very similar character to Darth Vader. And yeah, so I mean, what we talked about there was a little bit like how this movie, like it lacked imagination, and how, well, my theory in this point on why it's so similar to all the other Star Wars movies is because, you know, as a director, you're probably a little afraid of going all out and doing, you know, your own Star Wars universe and being all creative. And maybe, I mean, that is what George Lucas did in the prequels, you know, the 1, 2, 3 movies, where he just experimented and did like an entirely new universe with Jar Jar Binks, the character that everyone hates. And you know, he got so much shit for that now the Hollywood producers was like, okay, now we just do it like they did it before. Like, with George Lucas, he can't be here. I mean, and that's I think that in a way is like sad, because if you look at, you know, the 4, 5, 6, the first movies that were ever made, they were like really creative and imaginative, and that's what made them so great. Like George Lucas, he was like a pioneer in that, because nothing like that had ever been done before, and there was a risk of failure in that, you know, that they would have been like shit, but they weren't. And you can't ever make something like that, something really good and creative, unless you take a chance and a risk and, you know, go for something, be creative and imaginative. And in that, you can't be all this obsessed about what the fans are going to think about it, how it's going to be received, how much money it's going to make. So I think that it's like, this new movie is like a compromise, in a way. That's my take on it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think in a way it's kind of like when you have something that becomes so big and so many people are into it, get worked up about it, in a way it's kind of not yours anymore, and you kind of like lose the rights to do what you want with it, because otherwise people are going to be really pissed, like what happened with the last three. And, you know, it is probably really expensive to make the movies, and, it's got to make money. And although at this point, really, you know, as a lot of parodies on YouTube showed, everyone was going to go see this regardless of whether it was going to be good or not, you know.
Yeah.
You're going to go to at least find out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was interesting that because it was so very similar to the original movies' plots. It had a lot of the similar elements to that. You know, kind of all the basic points. You know, you've got the Empire, the large laser planet thing that looks like the Death Star, and you gotta destroy it, you gotta blow it up, and there were so many. So much of it was kind of like a rehashing, or like kind of, you know, just the same elements, just in a slightly different environment or what have you. But I mean, it's still made for a pretty entertaining movie.
Yeah, it was like entertaining.
Yeah, so maybe they're easing in, you know, preparing for the next two, which will maybe be more creative. I mean, they can't just copy all three of them, right?
Yeah, like, I guess to add to their credit, like, they have new characters, and I guess, you know, the way that they're new, like, they're kind of maybe more like, let's say, progressive, let's say, where it's like, okay, you have a female lead character, and so it's, you know, maybe it's like the female side that's like what's new or what's different, which, granted, in the Star Wars, you know, canon, I guess, or the universe of movies, that I don't think has really existed, so I guess you could say it's a difference. For me personally, like, it's not like a huge deal, but I think for a lot of people culturally, socially in society, that could be like a huge deal for many people. And also, let's say the African American guy, the guy who is a potential love interest for the female character, and how that's like something new and different, and only like in the very, like, let's say, surface sense, like, just because he's of their appearance, I'd say, just because of how they look, how they are. Of course, who they are as characters is, you know, let's say they're the good guys. You know, they have funny sides, they have passionate sides, they have, you know, there's some points of doubt, some points of insecurity with some of the characters too. So it's like they do have their dimensions, which, you know, could be explored in other movies in the future, in the sequels. Though in this movie felt like I was saying, like more like introduction, more like easing into things, or bringing a lot of old elements into there, which could be because or probably is because of people's people feeling comfortable with what's familiar, and so they want to see the same thing. And,
yeah. I mean, I would just like to add in there also, because in Sweden there is like this, every year here we have a Christmas television series that's aired from the 1st of December till the 24th, when we have the Christmas. And like this year they had like a different take on it, so it was like more, they did like each of the episode was like a historical recap to a certain area in the Swedish, for example, you know, 1000 BC and blah 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 until our time. And that was like harshly criticized by all the adult people, because until now there has always been like a story in the episodes, like, okay, it follows like a plot line and then it ends on the 24th December. Now it was more like almost like a, you know, Discovery Channel type of TV show. And I found that fascinating, because it's like the moment there is something new, we tend to like go into this like resistance and just push it away without allowing ourselves to, you know, appreciate it for what it is. And fascinatingly enough, many children actually like this, you know, because they have no memories of how it should be. They just appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the problem also with Star Wars, that it cannot really develop now, because it's such a ingrained memory in people of what it should be, and all those that come in contact with it are so afraid of, you know, not fulfilling those expectations, that it become like a jail, Star Wars jail.
Yeah.
It's stuck now. It cannot develop. And I also I saw that reference, for example, when we grow up and we, for example, learn to draw and things like that, and we find that we are good at something, and we get all this praise from others, and then in the beginning it's our expression coming through, and then as we start to get like addicted to this praise from others, we start to change and mold, and we lose that touch with our genuine expression because we want to satisfy someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And I also see, that's my assessment, that this is what has happened with Star Wars and also George Lucas. Like, he lost his touch with his inner creator, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. One thing, though, that was new that we were talking about was how, excuse me, how we have now, Finn, who is on the, he's a stormtrooper guy, and starts questioning what's going on, and which is kind of an interesting parallel to what's happening in the world today with, like, military members kind of questioning what they're doing, but what's interesting is that we've never really had that, somebody from the dark side starting to kind of question things and maybe turn to the other side, So, like, that's maybe, like, the one really new thing that they've brought through in this movie so far that we haven't seen yet.
Maybe we had Darth Vader, though. He did it little.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, like at the very end, like the last 2 minutes of the movie. But
yeah.
like, yeah, it is. I guess it's hard, like, to write movies, write characters.
Yeah, yes, it is.
And like you're saying, with the people being comfortable with what's new, what's different. Like, I'm sure there's some people out there, even just the fact that you have African American character, like that position, and also the female character. For them, it's such a huge deal that it's like they can't even stand it, And so it's like, I don't know, it's like how people work. Like, if you take everyone's opinions, beliefs, what they think is right, what's wrong, there's an impossible way for you to satisfy everyone. So it's like,
But I mean, as I see it, that the point of creative expression shouldn't be to satisfy people. It should be to, it's a moment you give to yourself where you share your own genuine expression, and how that come out and how others interpret that. It's not the point. It's more like who you are within that, like the expression. Like, you do it for yourself. That's how I see it, like creative arts.
Yeah, maybe someday when it's not so tied to money and having to make profits. Yeah, and I think an important element of, bringing your expression through into what you create is also kind of taking it into context with what's here, and kind of within that, using it as a vehicle to bring forth some kind of principle or message, or some perspective that you want to share with everyone else in the world, that you want them to see something interesting. That's what I kind of liked about, like, the first movie, is the original, was because there was a lot of those kind of philosophical points in a way, where you were getting to learn about the Force and how it works, and how it's about mind over matter kind of thing. Well, in terms of, like, focusing yourself and believing that you can do something, and those kind of, with Yoda and everything, kind of a little philosopher Yoda. So in the new movie, it's kind of like the point coming forth is this questioning of, the guy Finn in uh, dark side, where he's like, does this make sense? And I feel like this is really relevant to, you know, what we have today in terms of if you want to look at the political realm or the governmental realm, where we have, you know, the U.S. kind of existing as the empire, and you've got some troops that are like questioning where.
Could you tell me for a second? So, Victor, could you try repeating yourself? So I'm getting feedback from Kelly, which I think is, yeah, that was it.
Oh, it could be, yeah.
He's going out of his audio and back to his microphone.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of it kind of relates to what we have in the world today, and you know, it was interesting because I didn't consider this at first, but when I was looking at it, I was kind of really shocked by just how much it kind of relates to the kind of bigger questions that we face in reality today. You know, it's kind of like this. It's kind of like a metaphor for that in a way, in terms of what we're going through and what we're starting to consider, and it's kind of like considering what side are we, you know, who are we in that portrayal of what's going on? Who is the empire and who is the resistance? And yeah.
Yeah, in relation to that point, like a point that lies close to that is this point of how the empire is portrayed with these stormtroopers, that they're portrayed with masks and like anonymous, like a mass of people, and like the empire is evil. So, and that is also something that I see is like can also be seen in, for example, war propaganda and things like that. When, you know, a nation instigates war, they often prepare propaganda, and the other side is then portrayed as this anonymous mass that is dark and bad and evil. So I thought it was also cool that this guy Finn took off his mask and like suddenly he was like human, and yeah, that was a cool point. And also another point that relates to that is this, you know, does the Empire people see themselves as evil? For example, do they wake up in the morning and think to themselves, today I'm going to do evil things because I'm so evil?
Yeah. To talk about the mask, if you could, okay. So I've heard this before. This idea that like when you wear a mask, you have like a sense of anonymity, where when you're wearing a mask, you feel like you can do things that you wouldn't normally do because you're wearing a mask. So that works like both ways. Meaning, if you see people like with propaganda, like let's say like as with terrorists, they have like a black cloth over their face, whatever. It's like, okay, well, they're like hidden now, they're like different, or it's like, you know, like a big beard, I guess. I don't know. It's like you like when you do things to your face, like you try to like hide it. That creates both that feeling like you can do stuff that's like evil, like a soldier maybe, like you're wearing your costume, like let's say a police officer outfit or a soldier's outfit. You can like do stuff that you normally wouldn't do, and the outfit gives you that feeling that you can do that. So it works like both ways, both like psychologically, like for you as the person doing it, and also seeing someone else wearing that costume. And yeah, like you raised a good question there with whether they wake up thinking like I'm evil, and you know, my sense is that at least how they portrayed in this movie, they were saying the stormtroopers were like sort of stolen from as babies, I guess, or children from their families, so they could have been like brainwashed kind of thing, like they're just trained like soldiers of today. So you have that side, and then of course you have the evil figures, which the big creature guy is standing in the throne, in the hologram. They're like, oh, I'm evil, I'm gonna kill the universe because of some reason which we don't know. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's really interesting how they're kind of showing that, you know, implying that the the stormtroopers, like they're raised that way from birth, they're indoctrinated. It's really interesting that perspective's coming through, because it's kind of mirroring the same thing that is happening in reality. We're all indoctrinated to justify wars and fighting and things like that. And so it's really cool to see this coming through in the movie, to kind of bring forth that perspective of like actually kind of understanding the dark side, instead of where it was just seen as this enemy and you didn't understand why so much they're doing this, they're trying to dominate, and why the individual soldiers would participate in this. It's kind of just, you just kind of figure, oh, well, they're just evil, they're just that way, they're just mean, but like Victor's saying, like, do they wake up every day like, oh, I'm ready to be evil, ready to start my evil day, like, let's go get my evil on, like, but it's showing that it's like, it kind of also is showing that that doesn't happen. That doesn't exist. It doesn't really happen. People aren't just evil and want to like be evil and, start their day with a bowl of evil Cheerios, but it comes from indoctrination, and it has to. That's the only way that kind of can even exist, and it doesn't work 100%, and that's why we have Finn breaking through, like, and starting to question, like, what is going on? Why are we doing this? All this atrocity, is it really justified? So I'm really glad to see that perspective coming through in the movie, and hope that gets explored a little bit.
Yeah, and it also, that also happens with Kylo Ren, I see, because in the beginning he's this super evil, like he has the red lightsaber, he has the mask, he has a scary voice, he has the big cloak, so he's like just portrayed as evil. And then in this scene with this girl, he takes his mask off, and he has like this boyish face. He looks so gentle, and his eyes are like almost, you can almost see like there's like uncertainty and a little fear in his eyes. And then you're like, oh, you almost want to hug him or something. So that's so interesting. Like, okay, you take the mask off, the anonymous, and you see like the complexity behind it. Like, it's just not evil. Like, a human being is not just that. And you can also relate it to, like, for example, in a moment you meet a person and he's really pissed off, like, and then that moment can become a mask if you take and make it as a memory within yourself of that person. But if you remove that memory and like allow yourself to get to know the person in several moments, then you will see like, okay, but this is more complex. Like, for example, in that moment he was angry, maybe because in the mornings this person has like some emotions coming up, but then later in the day he's like, oh, it's quite a cool guy, and then in the evening sometimes he gets sad, and so that's a cool point, like removing this simplicity and realizing that human beings are complex.
Yeah. To add to that, when he like throws little tantrums, like he's like with his lightsaber like breaking things, like because he's angry. That reminds me like a little kid, whatever. It's like, yeah, I want to break this because I'm so angry, and that's like shows he's just reacting with emotions, and so that's this, let's say, more human side, more complex. Whereas with Darth Vader, in the first movie, he's like he kills the guy like just because he wants. I don't know, just like 1 second, just does it with no remorse, nothing, like no emotion there. So I don't know. I guess that's why it shows more complexity, not just pure evil act without any consideration. I guess it's like you can see that he's like in a way like a little kid in that sense.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting too how it's like he's trying to follow in Vader's footsteps, but at the same time it's like at the end Vader was kind of like, kind of gave up that struggle. So it's like, what is he really even trying to carry on? You know, like, does he wasn't there in that moment to see that, you know.
Yeah, but feeling that I had like the same doubt and questioning, and then I thought about it, and it's probably like some plot point they haven't explained yet, where I'm guessing like he was sort of told that he was like, oh, your grandfather is like the most evil thing ever. You'll never be able to live up to expectation. He's like super powerful, and yeah, so he's just been like told that, you know, it's like an idea he has in his head that doesn't match what we know in the movies from what we saw.
Yeah, that's a good guess, because that's kind of goes back to the first movies too, where it's like the, you know, who's your father and this and that, and how does that determine who you are and what your role is, and you know, that whole point of like being lied about what really happened to your father, and then you find out what, you know, it's like that whole you know, somebody used the past, used the story of the past to kind of manipulate who you are, and kind of brings an interesting question up in terms of how do we define who we are,
Yeah.
based on what we think our past is or what it is, or, you know, yeah, instead of maybe like, who am I now, who am I here,
Mm-hmm.
who do I need to be in this moment, rather than determining it on, you know, who was my father and who was this, you know. Because in the moment, you know, is where you are. You can decide, you know, who you'll be. You know.
Yeah, I feel like they could be like doing something that is kind of realistic in a way now that I'm like looking at it. Um, Meaning like let's say the first in all the older movies, how you had the story arc where everything like ended very nicely and like fitted, you know, very simply. You know, the good guys won and that's it. But of course, in reality, like in our real world, you know, if we go ahead and destroy our enemy's base and destroy their weapons, destroy everything, that really doesn't end the conflict in the real world, you know, in real life. To actually end conflict would involve like many years of like real like interpersonal relationships, like discussing and supporting and like work with people's minds and their emotions and their histories, their beliefs, their family's histories, genetics, so many things involved. So maybe like this movie is actually trying to show that, well, you know, the fight between good and evil, maybe there's something more complex there where it really hasn't been resolved, even though it appeared like it was resolved, like with a very nice bow at the end of the Return of the Jedi. But it shows, you know, like they have like a really complex story here where, you know, Luke Skywalker was training new Jedi's and they were all killed by this one guy, and so there's could be like some like thing that he hasn't like learned to realize in relation to really like ending, let's say, the conflict. I don't know. I just thought of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there could be more complexity there. They're trying to bring in.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that earlier, that you know, if there was like a movie like that about, for example, let's say Star Wars was more based on, you know, finding a real solution, that it would not have been as enjoyable or entertaining, because for example, then instead of a lightsaber fight, it would have been like, oh well, okay, let's sit down and discuss this. How do you feel? Okay, and how do you feel about this? And so what you know, what we can take from that is maybe how we've become addicted to conflict and drama to feel some form of entertainment and enjoyment in things, and also take that back to our own lives in how we feel alive and like something is happening when we have emotions and feelings and ups and downs, and not just this you know, okay, what's the solution? Okay, that's the practical solution. Okay, cool, done. Like it feels more, I don't know, like an adventure. If it's like, oh my god, this is such a problem. I have no idea how to solve it, and man, it's difficult. But yes, now I found a solution. It's going so great for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In preparation for this hangout, I was listening to people's reviews and reactions to the movie, and there's this one girl who was reviewing it who was like super angry at the Ken guy, the Ben, the evil guy, Like the guy who kills his father, Han Solo, Ben Solo, playing Han Solo. Oh, she was like super angry at him, and like hopes that he wants revenge for wants to like see the good guys kill the guy, I guess. Your revenge for killing Han Solo. And I think that's interesting because if they do make this trilogy like the last in the original trilogy, then they're gonna try like to maybe like save Ben Solo, not necessarily kill him, which in our world we're used to like just killing the bad guys and just be done with it. And I guess something that was original that Star Wars did in the original trilogy was how at the end of the series there's like forgiveness there, I guess, with Darth Vader and his son, the Skywalker. I mean, there was a point where sort of like a mini redemption within a movie, which I guess for movies in general, that doesn't really happen. You just have that bad guys die and end the movie. So in this, maybe they're trying to like do something like that, where they're adding that complexity where, okay, even though this guy killed Han Solo, even him, the guy that everyone hates right now, could come back from that, kind of thing. So I think if that's like direction you're going with, I think that actually would be like a cool lesson. But of course, it would take like 3 movies to do that lesson. But for me, like I would rather see it in one. But it's like I don't know. They're like just doing that, so I don't know. This is just what I wanted to say. That's it.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because now it's kind of like, are we gonna keep trying to do the savior thing? Like, I can save this person. Like, there's good in them. Like maybe it's showing us that that's not really the most effective approach, because it ends up, just seeming to backfire. Like, oh, I'm gonna believe that this person has some good in them, and they'll see the way, and then, oh, you're dead. Maybe there's a different approach that needs to be taken, and to be considered how you really can't save someone, and practically, like, if someone is a bit having that kind of conflict in themselves and can't necessarily be trusted, it doesn't make sense to just go and like, I'm gonna trust you and believe in you and believe in your good and just see what happens, and I'm dead. It's like you have to kind of realize that not everyone is really in control of themselves, and their emotions and their feelings and things like that, and you can't necessarily trust in some goodness to come through, because there is no goodness and badness that exists without the person themselves deciding to act one way or another, and you kind of have to look at a situation and really evaluate, what can I really do in this situation? Can I really trust this person? No, and is it really going to be effective? Is it really going to help that person to change by me just saying, I believe you're good, I believe you're not bad, without actually kind of dealing with what the person is actually experiencing? What are they actually thinking? What are they actually feeling? How are they actually justifying being this way? Why? What are the reasons? Because they've already gone through a process within themselves to get to the point where they are of having made the decision that they've made. So you can't just say, I just want you to be good now, and expect that that's going to have some sort of effect, because that decision to be who they are, to be the dark side or be evil, is built up on a lot of ideas and beliefs and thoughts and feelings, and without sorting that out, how's it going to change?
Yeah, it's like McDonald's almost. Like, oh, I believe you're cool. Now give me my burger.
Like, I believe it, so click.
Yeah.
So I guess for me, like what made like in all the movies, you have like Darth Vader, like in the Revenge of the Sith, you have and I guess Skywalker fighting Obi-Wan Kenobi and Obi-Wan decides that, okay, well, Anakin's too evil, so I have to destroy him. And so he tries to do that, and he was almost successful. Like, he thought he killed him, but he left him there, and he thought he was going to die, but it turns out he was alive still, and then he was saved. And then you have, in the Return of the Jedi, you have Luke Skywalker doing like, okay, like, I'm not going to kill you, Darth Vader, you're my father. And so he basically lets himself be like sacrificed, doing like the whole like sacrifice thing, which is of course similar to like Jesus on the cross, Christianity. So that's very similar. So I mean, that's kind of like what I saw perhaps Han Solo doing, like with the whole, when he walked out onto the railing, he sort of knew he was probably gonna die because he knew that he's not a Jedi, and the only way he would survive is if, you know, he would actually be successful. Otherwise, he was gonna die for sure. So I don't know, like I don't know why, but that message is, you know, very popular with Jesus, like sacrificing himself, and you know, that's really, I think, like really reaches people for some reason, and it is kind of like an ultimate point, like you can't, let's say, give up anymore. So practically, of course, like for me when I was watching movies, like no, don't step out there. He's gonna kill you for sure. He's just evil. There's more you can do with your life. You can try other things. You can try to help him out in other ways. Just don't do that. Like you could make more use of your time. And for me personally, I wouldn't do that, but I do understand, like perhaps in extreme situations, like, you know, him as a character, as his father is like, okay, this is my son. I have to do this, and even if I die, well, that's just my choice. I guess I don't know. So it's like, you know, when in really extreme situations, you know, you may sacrifice yourself for others. Though, of course, everyday practical life where you don't have people with Jedi powers and stuff like that, I guess, I don't know. It's much more different everyday life.
I mean, the problem here is basically that he didn't think it through, really. I mean, he just probably like got this emotion for, oh, I love my son, and something like that. I'm gonna save him, and then he walked out there. So that is also how, you know, we can take it back to ourselves. How many times throughout our days do we act on emotions or feelings, and we don't slow down to look at the point, you know, to go through the logic, so to speak. Because if he would have done that, he probably wouldn't have walked out there. Like, if he would have thought, I can probably make better use of my time there. No, he will probably, there's like a likelihood he will kill me. Am I willing to take that risk, yes or no?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. In like our real world, like if I were to like, okay, how can I sacrifice my life to make things better? Like me dying, like okay, that wouldn't really make any. No one really, would really care. I mean, so it's like in real life, like our world, that really doesn't apply so much at all. It only would apply like if you dedicate yourself like every day to something, like to some movement or something like that. In that sense, yeah, like it's like you're sacrificing your life, meaning you're sacrificing your choices and other things you could do because you're making a commitment. So I mean, like yeah, in the movie, it's like, you know, like, I guess for me, like just to give them credit, like they can only do metaphors. They're not gonna have like real world stuff, which I think would be cool to have like a documentary or like real stuff about how life actually works. But yeah, they only do like emotional 2-minute things, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point, how instead of approaching things practically, you know, it tends to get, we tend to just act on the emotions, and that would be something that would be really cool to kind of see come through in the movie or any movies. You know, and it's interesting because I was considering that, you know, as the fanboys of the movie, you know, we do have a kind of a power, you know, because just look at how, you know, there's so much pressure in terms of to not fuck it up again and to make a movie that people are going to like. It shows that the fan base really does have a huge power potentially, and that we really could ask for different things. You know, if we could consider, you know, how we would really like the movie to go, you know, if we're not necessarily just caught up in the emotions of it. And but, you know, we could bring forth practical perspectives of, like, what we would like to see, how we would like to see relationships change, because we do already put our voices out there, and, you know, it gets heard and considered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of times with the money we spend,
Yeah.
whatever we buy, that's our vote.
Yeah, I mean, many of these movies are made through. They actually like test audiences and check out, do these statistical revisions and research, like, okay, what kind of character works best, what scene works best, okay. So, like, we are voting with our money, and currently we are not very good at doing that, so we get, like, what we deserve, really.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you guys have any final thoughts or points you want to discuss?
No, I'm clear over here.
Yeah.
Okay.
When are the next two coming?
That's a good question. I have no idea.
But the next movie, or
Yeah. I bet there's going to be conflict and resolution.
yeah, that's a good bet. That's like how it always is. Conflict is good.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you, viewers, for listening and watching our discussion, and catch us on other hangouts on movies, and also on the Destiny process. We have person-related points that we look into and discuss as well. All our videos are recorded on our YouTube channel, so just check it out over there. And this one too, you can always rewatch it as well. And join us at the further live events as well. So hopefully we'll see you next week, and have a good one, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.